Welcome in, everybody. Good evening. Another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. We're going to be talking about these glorious college football playoff semifinal games. Everybody who's been complaining about this playoff, I hope you enjoyed the theater that was what we saw between Texas and Ohio State and what we saw between Penn State and Notre Dame, because the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl delivered. And there are wide-ranging implications here that will go as far as SEC college football wide, which has been a frequent topic here, but the SEC now officially knocked out. And even Paul Finebaum, as you see in the title, even Paul Finebaum himself has admitted now, this could be a little bit of trouble for the SEC. We're going to talk about that. But as we zero down into non-Power 2 country here, what this means for the Big 12 and the ACC, I do think that what I want to start with today is looking at what Ohio State has done and Notre Dame, but I think Ohio State has been more impressive to this point, and I do expect them to win the national championship game. Notre Dame fans, I guess you can get after me in the comments if you would like, but I want to talk about what that means for anybody who is not even just non-Power 2, but anybody who is not one of the top 10 to 15 teams in the country, 10 to 15 programs, rather, in the country. I think that is absolutely fascinating. I am going to roast one of my old takes from last week. It aged like milk out in the sun, and I'm gonna take myself to task for that. Plus, you see that last bullet point down there, the last thing on the rundown, very interesting. Mark Harlan, the athletic director at Utah, you remember him, of the Big 12 screwed us out of a win fame. I'm paraphrasing there, Mark. I'm sorry you didn't say that exactly, but may as well have said that at the podium after the Holy War. He has now apologized, walked back some of those comments in an interview with the Deseret News, which gives us a good time to take a step back and look at perspective on BYU versus Utah year one of both schools being in the Big 12. So I am going to enjoy that. I'm sure many of you guys will enjoy that as well. So that's the rundown for today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate that immensely. You guys know the drill. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Many of you typically are not subscribed. So if you are watching right now, live or taped, please make sure you are subscribed. Please make sure you've clicked like on the video and fill up that comment section. You guys know if you do that, one, it's just fun. But two, if you want to guarantee that your comment makes it on, your question or comment tonight makes it on the show, you can submit a super chat, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. Yeah, I appreciate everybody who supports that way. Totally free, though, just to like or subscribe. And make sure that you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. It's ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to subscribe. Join 3,300 plus other Big 12 fans who do, and get Big 12 news straight to your inbox for free multiple times per week. Cut through Big 10 and SEC bias in your college football news. It's just going to be what matters to the Big 12. So I appreciate all of you guys who do that. And you can chime in via Venmo as well. If you are not watching live, you can contribute on Venmo and attach a question or comment to your donation there, and I will kick off the next show with it. So it's a way to stay in touch, stay a part of the conversation, even if you are not watching live. So I appreciate everybody who does that. You know what, JJ? I see this. Appreciate that. I was almost going to do that. Oh, off camera. My bad, horns. There you go. There's nice horns down to start the show. I think that's an appropriate way to do that. Yeah. What am I'm seeing loses, not losses. Don't give them more ammo. What are we talking about there? Anyway. Oh, you're right. I did spell it wrong in the title. Thank you, Kyle. That's something that I absolutely hate. You know what? I'll change it right now, Kyle. I will change it right now because I hate spelling and grammar mistakes so much. That drives me nuts that I did that. It's probably still going to show up on the video if you guys are watching it right now with the misspelling there. But before anything moves on, we are changing that in YouTube Studio right now. Bam. It is changed. It has changed, my friend. Thank you. Anytime you ever notice a spelling or grammatical error, please let me know. Here's how I want to start this off. Okay, so Texas goes down 28-14 in a game that was much closer than that, in fairness, but it was yet another double-digit SEC loss in the playoff. We had 3 of those. They lost by an average of 17 points per game in the playoff, for those of you that are keeping track at home. But 3 of the last 4 games, if you go back to the Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State, 3 of the last 4 games in this college football playoff have been phenomenal games. Like, just absolute, on a 1 to 10 scale, like all 3 of those games, 9 out of 10 or better. I think Ohio State, Texas, you're probably looking at like maybe the lowest of the 3, like 9 of 10, but 9.5 or 10 of 10 for Arizona State, Texas, and then what happened in the Orange Bowl between Penn State and Notre Dame. It's been amazing for the sport. But I will also say, if you are somebody that's outside of one of these like 10 to 15 elite brands in the sport, you should also be looking around at what's happened in this playoff and say, it's pretty likely we will never see a non-blue blood champion again. Maybe to some, that's not like breaking news or anything crazy, but that probably will hit home for a decent amount of people. Big 12, ACC, even, 2/3 of the Big 10, maybe half of the SEC. We're not going to see a champion coming out of that group because of what it takes now. What's funny is I have seen some people still clinging to this idea that, or the take that, hey, this is not good. Look, we have a national championship game between a team that lost to Northern Illinois in Notre Dame and then a team that lost twice in the regular season. So that's a bad thing. People, mainly Georgia fans, have said that that's a bad thing for the sport because, it means the regular season games, John, just aren't as meaningful. If you can lose twice or you can lose a game to somebody as bad as Northern Illinois and still make the national championship game, like, why would we ever allow that? Well, did anybody think that this regular season was bad? Like, I guess I missed when the regular season was a problem because I thought this was like the most exciting and best regular season I can remember in a long time. And we were drawing comparisons to 2007, early on in the regular season. 2007, of course, being the year that everything went completely wild. And you had like Rutgers and South Florida and Kansas, all in the top 10 of the sport. It was a zany year, which is great. Like, people love that. We had a lot of that. And the other thing that we had this year was just more regular season games mattering, which flies right in the face of what the other argument is. Oh, these games don't matter as much. Well, no, we actually have larger swaths of the country interested because more of these games had college football playoff implications, right? Like Desmond Howard wanted to dump all over Arizona State and K-State being a game that you picked, but that was a game that had college football playoff implications late in the season, type of game that never would have before. So there was a lot more interest generated by the format. And these games were still meaningful, right? Like, it's not like the Northern Illinois game wasn't meaningful. Did Notre Dame not get crushed and just raked over the coals for losing that game when they did? I came on and did a show. I think that was one of the weeks that I did like a live reaction show on that Saturday. And I was like, well, this may free up a spot for the Big 12 in the playoff, right? Notre Dame's out. And I was far from the only one saying it. Look, I'm going to roast my bad takes later on in the show. Okay. For those just joining me, I've got a bad take that I want to roast myself for, but that is not one that I'm going to specifically put on me because there were plenty of others. Who joined me in that. And so they did at the time take a lot of crap for it. And they had a chance to rebound from it and still get to the national championship game, but they had to win every single other game on their schedule, and do it in fairly dominant fashion. I would give Notre Dame a lot of credit for that. Also, Ohio State, right? Like, it didn't matter that they lost 2 games. Tell everybody in Columbus, Ohio, that the Michigan game didn't matter. Like, that's still, honestly, that's one of the things that is the beauty of the sport, that the Michigan game turned into this referendum on Ryan Day and people wanted to fire him. And now the guy is a 9.5 point favorite to win the national championship in the title game. That's why college football is great, because that game still means so much that some people would almost rather have that than the national championship. That's why our sport is awesome, and it didn't change that. And then here's the real kicker. To all the Georgia fans out there, it's mainly Georgia fans that you see that are pushing this narrative that, oh, this is a bad thing for the sport, that we have a 2-loss team in the national championship game against a team that lost to Northern Illinois. First of all, we've had a 2-loss SEC national champion before. Hello, Les Miles. So to the SEC fans, you might want to chill on that just a little bit. But also, nobody in history, no matter who wins it, nobody in history will have earned a national champion more than the 2024/25 national champion of college football. Because, like, think about it. If it's going to be Ohio State will have, in the last month of their season, gone through number 7 Tennessee, number 1 Oregon, number 3 Texas, and number 5 Notre Dame to win a title. Like, are you kidding me? So back in the day, we had teams rolling through 12-0 or 11-1 to the national championship game where they're playing maybe 1 or 2 games against teams in the top 7, maybe 2. Now we've got a team that just did it 4 straight times, right? And Notre Dame would still be playing 4 in the top 12. Obviously, Indiana, some would argue whether or not they should have been up there, but they were in the playoff. They will have ripped off wins against 4 straight playoff opponents. It still is not bad, man. That still is not bad. That's a pretty good run. They've earned it more than any other champ in history. So I don't want to hear any of that argument. It's weird to me that comes up, and why can we not just enjoy this? Like, it's been great to watch these playoff games. Also, anybody from the SEC that wanted to take a dump on the selection committee, like Lane Kiffin, selection committee for the games that they put out. Have we watched the NFL playoffs? Have you seen how the wild card round of the playoffs goes? That's how the first round of a playoff typically works. You're going to have teams that should be winning by double digits in those games. It does not mean the committee did a bad job. Stuart Mandel had a fantastic tweet today. And I know you guys, I've had my issues with Mandel at times. Stuart Mandel had a great tweet where he was like, man, NFL selection committee really screwed up. They should have put the Bengals in because, like, none of these games were close. It's a great tweet. Shut up, SEC. I've got more for them later. But what this also does, that path that I just outlined, that I just told you, makes this a year where we're going to see, in my opinion, the most deserving national champion that we've ever seen. Yeah, that path is exactly what brings me to my first major point here, and that is we're never going to see another non-blue blood national champion again in this format, because that's what it takes now to win the national championship, is winning 4 straight games against top 7 teams. Maybe top 12 if you're lucky. You can extend it out to 12, and maybe you don't get 4 that are all in the top 7. But that's damn hard. And you can say, well, John, what if you get a bye? And okay, yes, well, you better get it done next year then. We better have a non-blue blood national champ next year, because if you're somebody that's not in the SEC or the Big Ten, we'll see if they get it done for next year. Maybe not even next year. My guess is next year we may still have the same format, but after that, man, 26, it is going to be a format where there will be no automatic buys for the Big 12 champ or the ACC champ. So you're going to be playing 4 games. They're going to make you start playing in the first round. So now your path will be winning 4 high-quality games like that, in which you would likely be favored in 0 of them. So the odds of that happening, as opposed to even just what happened with TCU a couple of years ago, get into the playoff, win 1 really high-level game, then you got to go play another really high-level game. I know TCU got absolutely boat raced, but if Ohio State makes a field goal at the end of the game against Georgia and maybe has some key injury, maybe you got a puncher's chance then in that game too. That's a much easier path than having to win 4 straight games like that. So what this playoff has done, it's giving more access. Technically, yes, you have better access to it if you are a non-blue blood team, but you also got further away from an actual national championship. Like, you got closer to the tournament, you got further away from the actual national championship with what has happened here. So look, I already knew that going into this. I'm just making the point. I'm accentuating this now because of what we've seen Ohio State do has been so extraordinary, especially considering how down in the dumps they were after the Michigan game. And I think it's like the perfect encapsulation of what this is. Like, the new format offers more access to non-blue bloods, but it does not offer them the Cinderella path. The Cinderella path is a big boy like Ohio State, who's probably more talented than anybody in the country, that just messed up and tripped all over themselves in the regular season and gets a second chance because of the playoff to then rip off the 4 impressive high-level games. Like, and I get it. Like, there are Big 12 fans, I'm sure, who are like screaming about this and, maybe would try to fight me on this and disagree. But like, because there have been Big 12 teams that have been close, like in our lifetimes recently. I mean, I just mentioned TCU. SEC country, I'm sure, would argue they were not close, but they were in the literal national championship game just 3 years ago. Baylor and TCU were very close in 2014. Like, those were playoff caliber teams in 2014 that kind of got screwed. And Ohio State wound up winning the national championship after they got in with the 4 seed. Maybe they had a shot. Oklahoma State, I mean, you just don't lose an overtime game in Ames to a bad Iowa State team. You're playing for the national championship in 2011. Probably should have played for it anyway. West Virginia was close in 2007. I'll just leave it at that, Mountaineer fans. I know you don't need any more reminders about that. K-State, close in 1998 and 2012. 1998 was the K-State version of West Virginia 2007. And 2012, if they just beat Baylor, they were going to play a beatable Notre Dame team for the national championship in 2012. I know that was not all that long ago, but things have changed enough in that time that I do believe it to be an accurate statement that we're not going to see a non-blue blood national champion. The other thing I would say to anybody who has a kind of knee-jerk reaction to that or a visceral reaction to that is join me in reading the list of national champions here. I was doing this earlier, and I was just like, we really don't ever have them anyway. Michigan, Georgia, Bama, LSU, Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, Florida State, Bama, Auburn, Bama. I wonder when that was. Florida, LSU, Florida, Texas, USC, LSU, USC, Ohio State, Miami, Oklahoma. Now we're back to the year 2000. Florida State, Tennessee, Michigan, Nebraska, Florida, Nebraska, Florida State, Alabama. Finally, in 1991, we get to Washington. And then in 1990, we've got Colorado and Georgia Tech. I mean, we're going all the way to a year and then 2 years after I was born to get to the point where we're saying, hey, those are some non-blue blood national champions that we had. Basically. And I'm being a little generous there. I'm including Nebraska, but at the time Nebraska was winning those titles, they were very clearly a blue blood in the sport. So I'm not sharing this to be like a Debbie Downer. This is a reality I've already reconciled with. I understand that this is the reality, but I think the way this played out in year 1 of the playoff, regardless of who wins, even Ohio State losing to Notre Dame will still make a good point with what the path was that they had to go through. But even looking at the path Ohio State's had just to get here to the national championship game, I don't know how. We have a little bit more parity these days, and the SEC has definitely fallen off from being this dominant force. That doesn't change the fact that if you're not one of these complete blue blood programs, it's damn near impossible to rip off 3 or 4 straight wins like this. I just think that's the reality of the situation. Now, you still need to playoff access is still important. I'm not saying here then, hey, just pack it all in and it doesn't, doesn't matter if you still have access to the playoff. Now, I mean, like, of course it does, because everybody wants to feel like they're included, feel like they have a chance. And just from a recruiting standpoint, you have to have playoff access, or we're talking about totally different things. Because even if a kid, first of all, you're not going to tell the kid, hey, we can't win 4 in a row like that. But a kid wants to be able to have the opportunity to be Cam Scatterbo, right? Cam Scatterbo blows up with his performance in the college football playoff, becomes a household name in college football because of that. You still need to protect that opportunity here in the situation that we're in. But I can also understand if you look at this and say, well, just throw up your hands and like, all right, let them go do their thing. eventually will create some other kind of second tier playoff system. Maybe that happens at some point. For now, I would still prefer to have the performances like Scattaboo and have a chance to have big moments like that. That may be the peak for everybody except the top 10 to 15 teams in college football. And that may not be, as I just read you, all those national champions, that much different than it was before. But I think you are even further away than you were. And Ohio State certainly serves as proof of that. Okay, click the $ below the chat box if you want to be a part of the show tonight. And we're going to say hello to Payson Cougar fan first here. What's up, Payson Cougar fan? Maybe time for 16 teams. No buys first round, same length of playoffs. I don't think this year is going to give you a lot of ammo for a lot of people to get on board with like, hey, we need more playoff expansion. Because we did get a lot of criticism about what those first round matchups looked like, and it would only create more of that. Especially if you're not giving anybody buys, then you're having the top 4 seeds play. You're just going to have a lot of games that look like the wild card round of the playoffs this weekend, and like what the first round games of the college football playoff looked like that drew intense criticism. You'll just have Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's Twitter account cannot handle a 16-team playoff with all the complaining that he would be doing about the field. Would it be fun? I mean, perhaps it would open up potentially more access for non-Power 2 schools in the playoff. I'm not sure that it would really change much in terms of your opportunity to like actually really advance. So I don't know. I think we're at a decent spot. I would still say overall, like, I didn't have a really strong feeling either way on whether or not I wanted the playoff to expand. It was kind of like, it's cool to know that you will most years as a Big 12 fan, for myself speaking here, be able to get a Big 12 team into the playoff, but it does move you further away from an ultimate national championship if that is the goal. And I don't know. I didn't have crazy strong feelings either way. But after now seeing a 12-team playoff play out, watching what it looked like and the games that we got here, and even though some of those games were not the closest, it was just cool to have on-campus playoff games and be able to enjoy more of these postseason games. Maybe the novelty wears off on that if they always are games that are not going to be very close, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good celebration of the sport in general with what happened. So I'm okay with it, but I wouldn't be like heartbroken if we were still back in the 4-team playoff era. I'm kind of okay either way. Mr. Ed, what's up, Mr. Ed? Thank you for being here, Mr. Ed. Mr. Ed says, my 2026 changes. So, okay, this would be when we're redoing the playoff when the contract's up. College football playoff changes to 16 teams. All right, we've got a couple 16-teamers in here. Rank 1 through 16, top 3 ranked conference champs guaranteed top 8 slot. 4th and 5th conference champs guaranteed top 12 slot. Okay, so you're guaranteed 2 buys. If you're 1 through 4, you're guaranteed 1 buy. If you're 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12, host 13 through 16. Okay, I mean, like, I guess I can get on board with that. And I sit here saying, like, nothing that we saw this year would really point to me toward a overarching need to expand the playoff, but it probably is going to happen. I mean, we know that the Big Ten in particular really wants to push to 14 at least. I'm sure we'll get further expansion. I don't think we really need it, but I also won't complain about having more games to watch. So you're just not going to get a real impassioned argument from me either way on expanding further, keeping it the same, even going in reverse and going back to the 14 playoff. I would say I think it was more fun this year to have what played out than just to have seen Oregon and Georgia play the national championship game, which is what the BCS would have delivered us this year. So I'm definitely down with it from that standpoint. Honestly, Mr. Ed, that seems like a decent setup there. 2 buys is just maybe some people might give you pushback on like 2 buys, either one being too much time, like we saw everybody making the observation this year, everybody that got a buy lost this year. So competitive disadvantage, perhaps, with doing that. If you're taking 2 weeks off, there's even more of that, obviously. Maybe some people would give you pushback on that, but that seems like a really intriguing format. I think that's not bad. That's not bad. Kenneth, what's up, Kenneth? Kenneth says they will tweak the format when it goes to 16, where a 1 or 2 seed blue blood SEC or Big Ten team will yearly play a G5 champion in the first round. Okay, well, yeah, maybe so. You may be right. Again, the number has been 14 that has really been pushed over the last year or so. And if we got that, I think about the complaining that's going to come there, man. It'll be like, the next Lane Kiffin will be sitting there. Maybe it will be Lane, maybe not. The next SEC coach will be sitting there complaining about having to watch whoever, UNLV. And if they're playing a number 1 or number 2 seed blue blood, I mean, if it's Oregon against UNLV, well, hell, I start to say that it's like, well, Boise builds its entire resume off of playing Oregon close. So what do I know? Maybe some of those games could actually be close. I suppose I'll bow out on that, Kenneth, because my own hypothetical that I was trying to give there backfired on me. So my apologies. My apologies to the Mountain West. My apologies to the Mountain West. Okay, click the $sign below the chat box if you want to be a part of the show tonight and guarantee your chat makes it. A lot more people in here now than when we started. Appreciate all of you who are here. Free ways to support the channel and the work I do, my content. Please like the video. Make sure you are subscribed if you're watching on Twitter, which a ton of you are. If you could just go over to John Kurtz on YouTube, click like, click subscribe. You don't even have to continue watching there. You can keep watching on Twitter, but that all helps. And definitely, Twitter folks, you guys like to read your news. The Open for Business Big 12 newsletter hits your inbox multiple times per week, totally free, ofbnews.com, ofbnews.com to get subscribed to that. 3,300 plus Big 12 fans do. All right, so the Paul Finebaum piece of this, the SEC piece of this that you saw in the video. Don't you just love seeing a good Paul Finebaum thumbnail every time that you're coming in here? We've been fighting this SEC narrative battle now for weeks, really months almost at this point. And good news, the battle's over. It's done. Like, the SEC's out. They're not in the national championship game for a second straight year. Even Paul Finebaum has conceded. He has waved the white flag. And he had some new comments about this on his little YouTube piece with ESPN's Matthew Berry. So the good guys won. The good guys won here. Battle over for this year. But that doesn't actually mean that it's over. That's part of the issue. So, look, the dust is settled. It's an all-North national title game. Nobody in the South involved. In fact, I saw people already taking this angle. It was not just people waiting to grave dance on the SEC. It was so much so that they took it as just the South. And I saw people saying, well, Texas isn't, I think was it an Athletic article? Might have been. It was Texas is in the national championship game. That's not a team from the Deep South. So this is the first time in however long that the Deep South has not been involved here. And what that means, they weren't even waiting for Texas to lose the game to Ohio State. That felt inevitable, that everybody knew was probably going to happen. They didn't even wait for that. They wanted to jump on the SEC's grave before that. And you know what? Fair enough. Texas is, that's a Big 12 team. That's a roster that was recruited to play in the Big 12. They're now in the SEC. And we're getting a Big 10 versus independent national championship game. Big 10 versus independent national championship game. 2 years in a row, the SEC has not been involved in the national championship game. Here's the tail of the tape right now. The last time the SEC was in the national championship game, the Big 12 was in the national championship game. So same drought for the Big 12, and that's new look Big 12, not Oklahoma, not Texas. Same drought for the Big 12 in a natty versus the SEC in a natty. Okay? The Big 10 went 5-3 in the playoff this year. The SEC went 2-3. The 3 losses were by an average of 17 points per game. Not a single one was even a single-digit loss. They were all by 10-plus points. Not close games. Not close games. Ohio State, Texas was pretty competitive, but the final score was 14 points. 17 points per game. Tennessee got blasted, and Georgia never really, they never had the ball down one possession in the fourth quarter against Notre Dame. So, boy, I tell you what, Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, Notre Dame, all playing for the national title over the last 2 years. Nobody from the SEC. Anybody who is still arguing about the superiority of the SEC at this point, like this year, you're a total shill or a Georgia fan, because that's basically the only people I still see out there trying to put up some kind of a fight. The Georgia stuff is funny. I alluded to that earlier, but of course, Georgia fans will be irate at this because in the old school BCS world, they would have just played a Georgia versus Oregon national championship game. Neither team even made it to the semis. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing that we got to play it out the way that we did this year. And, this argument about a team that lost to Northern Illinois in the national championship game, well, that same team, you got your crack at that exact same team. And apparently Georgia is not up to Northern Illinois standards. So there's no argument left. There's no argument left here, legitimately, for the SEC at all in 2024 for their superiority. Could we have a healthy debate about who was actually the best conference this year? Like, is it close? I mean, I think at this point I'm going to give the nod to the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, like, we can have a discussion about that. The SEC, it's not like they're out of that discussion. I'm not saying that they're behind the Big 12 or the ACC or anything like that. But the argument for SEC folks has always been about that they deserve special treatment. That's the argument that's dead and gone, totally dead and buried. Outside chance that someone could convince me that they are still the best conference in America this year. But, frankly, with the way Ohio State's playing, seeing Penn State, I really thought Penn State probably should have won that Notre Dame game. I felt like they kind of choked that away and they were actually the better team. James Franklin doing James Franklin things. No thanks to Drew Aller. The SEC is a more consistent top-to-bottom conference, but the Big Ten at the top, man, pretty damn good and hard to argue with. Either way, the point is the SEC is not on special treatment level. And even, man, Paul Finebaum has been backtracking here. He already waved the white flag on Alabama getting into the playoff that we talked about last week on the show. And now we have this. This is what Paul Finebaum said with ESPN's Matthew Berry after watching Ohio State, Texas. He says, quote, "That is significant." And by that, he means the SEC not making the title game again. "That is significant. Everyone always thinks that those of us who live in SEC country try to hide things like that. Even today, we're still arguing for Alabama to get it, which there are still some, I'm sure. But there's a dramatic moment. It's a seminal moment in time that I didn't expect, especially with a 12-team playoff." So Paul Finebaum said that this is a seminal moment, people. The SEC performed so poorly this year that it is a seminal moment for the conference, as noted by the conference's biggest supporter here. Finebaum went on to also say, "It's really amazing when you think about it. The last time the SEC missed the title game was before Saban. Urban Meyer had just arrived at Florida. Les Miles was about to start roaming the sidelines." Now, I will correct Finebaum here, and I went and listened to this to see if he made mention of it. He did not. Paul, the SEC was not in the national championship game last year either. Okay? Let's just clarify that point. So, no, the last time they missed the title game was not before Saban. In fact, it's been back-to-back years. But if you want to go before that, then okay, fine. Urban Meyer had just arrived at Florida. Les Miles was about to start roaming the sidelines. To think that we're in that moment is a cause for a lot of concern, at least in the southern part of the world. So Paul Finebaum called it a seminal moment and said that it's a cause for a lot of concern. If Finebaum is to that point, if Finebaum is saying that, the battle is over. The war may not be over, but the battle is over. The SEC reign as far and away the dominant force in college football that deserves everything handed to it on a silver platter and special treatment. That's gone, and it's going to have to be earned back. And we'll see if it will be earned back. I think that will be very interesting. I am not foolish and naive enough to sit here and say the SEC is going to just wilt away and will never regain overwhelming superiority over everybody when they sit in the most talent-rich part of the country, when they have fan bases and boosters and infrastructures that care more than anybody else, at the very, very least, as much as anybody else. But We all joke about it just means more, the SEC slogan, right? It kind of does, and they've been proving it with like brown paper bags full of cash for years. Like they want to find a way to do this. And you saw how much pain their fans were in this year as they're what they feel like is their birthright, essentially, to be anointed the superior kings of college football, no matter what, was taken away from them. Like they didn't handle that very well. They're not going to just take that quietly. I can honestly relate a little bit as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, right? I always make the joke, anytime that the Chiefs have lost, which has not been very much lately, not been very often, but anytime they lose, I will make the joke and send out the tweet like, hey, as a red-blooded American citizen living in Kansas City that has started living here in the year 2000, it is my birthright to watch the Kansas City Chiefs win football games. Why is this not happening? I demand to speak to my congressman. That's the kind of attitude that you have as a Chiefs fan right now. That's what it's been like. I get it. Like that's what it's been like for SEC fans. But this year, the evidence just doesn't back it up, man. It just doesn't back it up. Anyway, those fans feel that. They're going to dig in. They're going to push as hard as they can to fight back, whether that's digging deeper into their pockets, if you're talking about donors, whether that's finding a way around what the system is right now, which we're about to go into this revenue sharing era, which means, and this is, I'm going to get into some of the Ross Dellinger article that I didn't quite have time to get into on the last show, but the new battle will become, how do you supplement the money that's going through actual legitimate revenue sharing to get more money to your players in NIL deals that as of right now have to go through this like Deloitte clearinghouse and have to be like legitimate deals. Like it can't just be, we're paying you money. It's got to be, you got to go make appearances or sign autographs or whatever. It's got to be like a legitimate deal. Can you get around that? Here's a quote from Walker Jones, who is the head of the Ole Miss Collective. And I must say, that is a very SEC name that I would expect to be the head of the Ole Miss Collective. Walker Jones says that's going to be the new frontier, the above the cap supplemental NIL. That's the new battlefield. The question is, can it really be regulated? Ross Dellinger goes on to say, to remain competitive, an over the cap budget of $3 to $7 million is necessary, some believe. So you've already got the $20.5 million that's going to go for all the revenue sharing for all the athletes at the school and all sports. People are saying, 14, 15 of that would go to football, and then you'll need an extra 3 to 7 on top of that outside of the revenue sharing with these what have to supposedly be legitimate deals to really truly be competitive at the top of the sport. SEC fans are going to do whatever it takes, I promise you, to make that happen. Get rich or die trying, man. As 50 Cent, the great 50 Cent biopic, get rich or die trying. The SEC will do that. They're going to find every single way they can to get around it, make the portal. Right now, it looks like there are legitimate reasons why this has happened, right? This isn't just some blip on the radar screen. It's NIL, transfer portal, having more of an opportunity. Players that would be second or third stringers at Georgia have an opportunity to leave, play, and get paid to do it somewhere else. And so because of that, you're not going to be able to hoard as much talent. That's a legitimate thing that's happened that seems to have thinned it out a bit. The Big Ten now has, first of all, they don't have to compete with Nick Saban. Nick Saban is out, who's a guy doing a ton of the heavy lifting for the SEC. And now the Big Ten, they may have Ryan Day, who would be the latest national championship winning coach. They've got Dan Lanning, who, I think is the best young coach in the game and is on a rocket ship to the top. They may have the last 2 national champions in the Big Ten. Like, there are a lot of shifting plates here, tectonic plates of college football that have shifted and changed the landscape here. But having said all of that, the SEC will try to figure out how to make this portal NIL era work for them. They're going to do their damnedest. And I, as much as, I'm sure I get labeled an SEC hater. You know what? I'll embrace that a bit. I'm a realist. I understand their place in the college football world. I wouldn't try and tell you that the Big 12 is better than the SEC, but I will try to call out the SEC on its BS when it gets out of hand. But you know what? Call me an SEC hater. That's fine. I also am not dumb enough to sit here and think, well, the SEC is just going to take this lying down and it will always be this way. We'll see. But the battle is over. The war rages. The battle is over. The tale of the 2024 season will be the SEC was a regular conference just like everybody else. It was not head and shoulders above anybody. That's the truth. And that's what we got settled with the Texas loss to Ohio State. All right, back to some super chats. If you have anything, click the $ below the chat box in order to pop on to the show tonight. We say hello to Alan. What's up, Alan? Appreciate you for being here, Alan. Great to talk to you. Alan says, John, Blue Bloods may rule the college football playoff, but so long as an Arizona State or someday KU has the chance to be a college football Cinderella, I'm okay. Well, yes, and I will address that because I've heard Josh Pate talking a lot about this and kind of crushing people, being like, no, there will never be a college football Cinderella again. Or maybe he just was saying Cinderella, period. I think the important distinction there is he's talking about, like, will there be a Cinderella national champion again? Not in the true form of Cinderella, right? Like, you're not going to have like a Boise State win the national championship. I don't think you'll have a Big 12 team win the national championship. I don't think you'll have an ACC team win the national championship. Maybe a Florida State could get there. I think Clemson, they were in the playoff this year. I don't know. I just don't see them getting back to that elite level. Maybe Florida State still has that upward mobility. Hell, even Miami with a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback couldn't even get into the playoff this year. Don't think you're going to see that. But could you see it in one game? Like Arizona State stop Texas on 4th and 13 or the targeting get called? Yes, you can. You can definitely still have that. So I wouldn't stomp all over Cinderella and say you won't ever see that happen. You will. I just don't think you'll ever see it happen 4 times in a row. Jayhawks can rise to the top of the Big 12 with wins over Iowa State and K-State this week. Rock Chalk Jack, Allen. God. Thanks for reminding me, Alan, that I got to watch K-State play Kansas this week. Boy, that basketball situation at K-State is not good. That is not good. I saw a Houston fan say, man, we've drilled some teams this year, but weird vibe at K-State. I haven't seen somebody look like they were trying less hard than K-State this weekend. And it's hard to argue, man. It's hard to argue. So I very much do not look forward to that, Alan. But Kansas, Iowa State will be that'll be a good game. It'll be a good game. We'll check that one out. Eddie, what's up, Eddie? Appreciate you being here, Eddie. Eddie says, hey, buddy, glad to catch a live show. I loved Ohio State beating Texas. Karma for the questionable win over Arizona State. Indeed, more on that game in just a moment. NIL has evened the playing field. The SEC cannot stand it. Go Big 12. Yeah, combo of NIL and the portal, because it's not only can you pay and a school like a Texas Tech can go outbid SEC schools in the portal for a handful of guys, but also it's the combo of you can get paid and go play right away somewhere at a very good school, even if it's not an elite school, if you're someone that's sitting like second or third string at Georgia, Bama, etc. So yes, love it, Eddie. And Eddie pops in again, taking everything into account. It has been a good year. We end 2024 on a high note and looking to 2025. The Big 12 has many teams with optimism for the 25 football season. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think would have been nice to have 2 Big 12 teams in the playoff. It would have been even nice to have BYU get legitimate discussion for a final playoff spot, which they deserved. But it is what it is. It didn't happen. But, BYU's performance in the Alamo Bowl kind of raised some eyebrows and made people look around like, okay, maybe we really should have. The SEC narrative getting whacked down has been great. It's been awesome to see. And Arizona State acquitted itself incredibly well in the playoff, which should help the Big 12. And yes, I think you're going to see a lot of hype for a number of teams next year in the Big 12, man. Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Baylor, Texas Tech with the portal haul, K-State maintaining all the young talent that they have. And I think adding some nice stuff in the portal should be in the, top 5 or 6 teams in the Big 12. I think that's a pretty strong group. So yeah, I agree with you, Eddie. And Eddie says UConn to the Big 12. Well, they had a nice football season, won a bowl game this year. So maybe a little bit there. I still have my doubts that we see it happen anytime soon, but your Mark, I'm sure, is going to keep pushing for it. So, Eddie, appreciate you. Thank you for being here, my friend. Now it's time to take myself to task a little bit here. I am generally full of amazing takes. As you guys know, that's why you're here watching the show, right? That's why 1,500 people are in here watching this live right now, because I am full of amazing takes all the time. But every once in a while, one slips through the cracks that may not be that great. And I do have one that I think looks a little bit silly after what we saw in the Cotton Bowl. So I will take this opportunity to dunk on myself a little bit. Arizona State came painfully close, as we know, to beating Texas in the Peach Bowl. I can't imagine being an Arizona State fan, because I still sit here and think, like, God, 4th and 13, man. 4th and 13, that's it. That's all it was. I was getting ready to leave somewhere. I was trying to see. Was like begging, like, get this game over with. I need to leave. I got to go, but I want to see the end of this game. So I remember like standing up, and I'm literally like, okay, I'm getting ready to leave. I'm getting all my stuff good, because this is the one play. It's going to be done, and we're leaving. Nope. Touchdown. You guys know the end. That's got to be haunting. So I apologize, Arizona State fans. Plus the targeting penalty, which now I think most experts we have seen that have weighed in on it have agreed that it should have been a targeting call, and would have given you a chance to kick a field goal. No guarantee there with Arizona State's kicking situation. Well, now, after Arizona State came painfully close to beating Texas, Texas came pretty close. I won't say painfully close. Texas came pretty close to getting Ohio State. They were obviously a yard away from tying the game late in the fourth quarter. And then Sark decided to pitch the ball on 2nd and goal from the 1, which was a disaster. And Caleb Downs, like a heat-seeking missile, shot that down, ended the threat. And then you have the fumble 6 and everything that transpired after that. Basically a meltdown from Texas at that point. And it was all Ohio State. They win 28-14. You can also throw in, if you're talking about painful for Texas, just not defending a screen at the end of the first half. Like, I don't know how exactly that happened and got so wide open, but credit one for Chip Kelly on that to scheme that sucker up. But either way, we have a painful loss for Arizona State to Texas, painfully close, and a pretty close Texas loss to Ohio State. So transitive property, right? Transitive property would tell you, hey, Arizona State could have been right there with Ohio State. Could have been right there. Now, transitive property is dangerous. You can't just apply that across the board in college football willy-nilly without thinking about it. That's just not how it works, right? Same way that we can't say, well, Northern Illinois would be playing Ohio State for a national championship because they beat Notre Dame earlier this year. Nothing against Northern Illinois. Nothing against them at all. But I do not think that they would be in the national championship game here, right? So it doesn't exactly work like that. But I do have to admit, watching that game, I thought Ohio State, especially after how quickly they scored early, I thought Ohio State was going to really control that game. And it was going to wind up looking like, yeah, I don't think Arizona State would have had a shot. After watching that game now, I'm like, man, maybe they could have hung. Maybe they could have hung. And that's why I'm going to say it was a bad take to say last week, hey, maybe it was for the better that Arizona State just played a really close game with Texas, got some controversy there to get everybody talking about it, and then lost so that they didn't have to go get freight trained by Ohio State, because we saw with TCU in 2022 what happens with that. Nobody remembers or talks about the fact that they beat Michigan, which was an incredibly impressive win. Nobody talks about it at all. It's just all about that championship game. And, Saban uses it as ammo that his Bama team should have been in, all this stuff, which is crazy and ridiculous, but it is what it is. That's how it goes. I do not think, had Arizona State played Ohio State, that they would have lost 65-7. I don't think that would have happened. And I think it's fair to say probably a bad take from me on that standpoint. Now, it also, as I said, transitive property, dangerous. It doesn't mean that it would have worked out exactly like that. Like, Arizona State's pass defense is 109th in the country in success rate on opponent dropbacks. Basically just means success rate, like, how often a dropback winds up being a successful play. They're 109th in the country on that. Texas is 4th. And Texas did a masterful job defending Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. Jeremiah Smith had one catch for 3 yards. I mean, if you would have given me odds on him having more than 3 yards or 1 catch going into that game, I would have bet my entire life savings, mortgage, the whole thing on it. That's crazy that Texas did that. They've got a great pass defense. Kwiatkowski, I think, is an elite defensive coordinator. Like, that's a well-operated machine. Could Arizona State have done that? No, I do not think Arizona State could have done that. And if Ohio State has that part of the offense open up, probably talking about a different game. I mean, even Emeka Egbuka only had 5 for 51. Could have made a massive difference in the game and game flow changes. And also, Ohio State's got a great front seven. It would have been difficult for Cam Scadaboo, but all I heard all year is about how good Texas' defense was too. And Arizona State still rolled up over 500 yards on Texas, more than double what Georgia had done either crack. I guess it was nearly double what Georgia did in the SEC championship game in terms of offensive output. So I do think Arizona State could have found ways to move the ball. But the take is bad because we saw enough that the answer should be let Arizona State shoot its shot, man. Shoot or shoot. Take your shot. Take your crack at it. And potentially was there a little bit of letdown effect for Ohio State here? Was there a little bit of letdown effect with the games that they've already won? And the fact that now everybody was thinking, well, you're just going to roll over Texas. Maybe a teeny bit of that. Probably could have been more of that if it were Arizona State, right? You just beat the number 1 team in the country, Oregon, and clobbered them. Everybody thinks you're just rolling through it now. If it's Arizona State, maybe they'll let their guard down a little bit. Scared money don't make money. And the take that I had was some scared money. Arizona State taking their shot against Ohio State. I would have loved to have seen it. If you are curious, you should definitely, if you're a college football fan, check out College Football Insiders. Stats of War, Parker Fleming on Twitter, who is great. His site, you can see the hypotheticals between teams. So if you go Arizona State v. Ohio State on a neutral field, Arizona State has a 13% chance of winning, according to their numbers, and the score would be 32-17, so 15-point game. If you compare Arizona State, Texas on a neutral field, what they predicted there, 29-18 Texas with a 22% chance of Arizona State winning. So that's pretty damn similar. And look how close Arizona State came to winning that game. 22% chance of beating Texas, 13% chance of beating Ohio State. Similar enough that go take the shot. See if you can put together at least another good competitive game, which would earn you even more respect. Even more respect. I would not have predicted a win for Arizona State, obviously, as you guys could tell with the take that I had last week. But I think we learned it was not a foregone conclusion that they would have gotten blasted. And I should have had a little bit more confidence. Cam Scadaboo, Sam Levitt, I am sorry. Marcus Arroyo, I'm sorry. Kenny Dillingham, very sorry. Please accept all my apologies. Bad take. I won't do it again. I will go back to making every take that I have elite here on this show from there on out. And that is a John Kurtz promise, my friends. That is a John Kurtz promise. All right. Let's see. I think we have one. Yes, Alan. Alan, appreciate you, Alan. Alan says, John, forgot to say kudos to the Cats. Likely national champ QB Will Howard chose KSU first. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. Hey, thank you, Alan, for giving me some time to give my boy Will Howard a shout out, because I know a lot of people probably wonder, how are K-State fans feeling about this? I've got no issue with it at all, man. I'm definitely rooting for the guy. First of all, a great guy, and he's been through a lot in his college career. First of all, understand, go back to 2020, the pandemic season. Now, Will Howard got thrown into a bad situation where he was a true freshman quarterback. He's like a 3-star, had some middle-tier Power 5 offers, and chooses K-State. I think it was KU, Minnesota. I just looked at it the other day. KU, Minnesota, maybe one or two others. He's that caliber of quarterback. And in 2020, because of the pandemic and Skylar Thompson getting hurt, he gets thrown in and has to play as a true freshman. Just not ready. Just totally not ready. And so there's a lot of fan frustration. The season goes totally south. Again, pandemic had a lot to do with that. But he was just thrown into an unfair situation. And so you're looking at him like, man, boy, this guy just doesn't look like he's ready at all. In 2021, Chris Kleiman calls him the best backup quarterback in the country. Thompson gets hurt again at the beginning of the season. He has to go in and play, and the results are okay. but you're still like, all right, kind of struggling a bit against Nevada. Like, what's going on here? To think that guy is now at the peak of the sport and is possibly about to win a national championship is crazy. Now, in 2022, after K-State recruits over him and recruits Adrian Martinez to come in and take his starting job, he doesn't transfer. He sticks it out, and that works out because Adrian Martinez gets hurt. Will Howard plays phenomenal football down the back half of the season for K-State, wins the Big 12 championship for the Wildcats, plays in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, and I love the guy for that. It was an incredible season. 2023, he was a bit turnover prone. Things just didn't click quite as well, but it was still a solid season. So I respect the guy immensely for where he came from to where he's at now. And nothing but the best. Wish nothing but the best for him. I hope he's making a ton of money at Ohio State, and he'll never probably, I guess he did lose the Michigan game, but I would hope he wins the national championship, won't ever have to buy a drink in Columbus again in his life, and probably shouldn't have to in Manhattan either. So nothing but love. Nothing but love for my guy, Will Howard. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Okay. All right, so the final thing here. We break away from the college football playoff because this was enough where this really got my attention. We have an apology from Utah Athletic Director Mark Harlan. And in light of that, I wanted to take a step back and look at how crazy differently year one in the Big 12 went for Utah and BYU. Like year one for both of them being in the league together, right? Because it's honestly, it's hard to have more respect for BYU at the end of this past year. And it's kind of hard to have less respect, relatively speaking, for Utah based on what happened to Utah. And you really just have to sort of laugh at it. And even what Mark Harlan is saying, I think kind of confirms that. So with this, you got to go back. Remember the Holy War. Everybody remember the Holy War. Fabulous ending to the game. Crazy game. I don't know that it was like a fabulous game all the way through, but we got a great ending. And there was a controversial holding call on 4th down on BYU's eventual game-winning drive. So Mark Harlan, Utah's athletic director, was very upset about that holding call. Turns out, we see all the reverse angles from people. It actually looks like it was the correct call. But Mark Harlan, in the post-game press conference, commandeered the podium, got up there and said, quote, "I've been an athletic director for 12 years. This game was absolutely stolen from us. We were excited about being in the Big 12, but tonight I am not. We won this game. Somebody stole it from us. Very disappointed. I will talk to the commissioner. This was not fair to our team. I'm disgusted by the professionalism of the officiating crew tonight. Thank you." Man, even reading that back now, like I heard it a million times when it happened. Reading it back now, I'm like, that was a lot. That's an athletic director. An athletic director that has gotten into some Twitter spats before, or at least gotten involved on Twitter, which would let you know that, perhaps, and I am not immune from this at all, by the way, perhaps a little bit of a emotion on the sleeve kind of guy that can get wrapped up in the emotions of things. It has happened to me many times on Twitter. But as an athletic director, you got to be careful about that. You're getting paid at least high 6 figures. You got to have a little bit more restraint. Well, he lost some of that money because Mark Harlan was fined $40,000 by the league, publicly reprimanded. And it was a mess. I mean, it was definitely a black eye for Utah. Whether Utah fans want to admit or not that was a hold, it's not a great look to have your athletic director doing that at all. Well, apparently Mark Harlan agrees because he has finally spoken about all of that for the first time. He did an interview with the Deseret News. They do a great job, by the way. If you want Utah and BYU coverage, I love reading the Deseret News. But he has now admitted that he apologized to everyone involved in the aftermath of the incident. So, hey, kudos to Mark Harlan. It took a while to come back around on this. And his statement that he put out right after the fine from the Big 12, I mean, that was not really like the most. I didn't see a ton of contrition in that necessarily, but I guess time heals all. With some time, he's had time to think about it. And this is what he said to the Deseret News. He said, quote, "I think as we talk about last season, as Kyle would say, there's things that they need to improve in as we head into next year. I would say the same of myself. I think that night, obviously, I reacted emotionally and my frustrations were expressed in a way that was not worthy of a true leader of a program of this stature. And certainly, as any leader should, you learn and grow from those experiences. I mean, that's the statement. Now, that statement probably should have just come out right afterwards. Like, that's not the way a true leader of a program of this stature acts. But at least we got it now. At least we got it now. Kudos to him for saying it now. Better late than never. And that really is the truth. Like, even if it was a bad call, as an athletic director, the move to get up there and stoke the flames of your fans who have looked down on the conference since coming into it while you're in the midst of a 5-7 season, that's a pretty bad look. And that's not leadership. And that's not the way you should be conducting yourself there. So, yes, wholeheartedly agree with his assessment there. Again, recognizing I'm not saying I would be great at it. Shoot, I'd be popping off all the time, man. But that's why I just do a YouTube show and sit behind a Twitter account. Like, I'm not now, if you paid me, I don't know exactly what Mark Harlan makes. If you paid me $800,000, then sure, I'll delete the Twitter account. I won't even mess with it at all. Like, you give me that, I will make some concessions there. I would change things. There is more to the story here. It says, the day after his postgame rant, Harlan reached out to both Tom Holmoe, the athletic director at BYU, and Kalani Sitake, BYU head coach, to apologize for his comments. He said, quote, reflecting, I felt like it took away from their victory and the hard-earned victory of those student athletes in their program. Harlan also reached out to Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark to apologize. And he said, quote, bringing the Big 12 and diminishing our participation in the Big 12 was, in my view, inappropriate. I don't want at all anyone to think that Utah's participation in the Big 12 isn't something we're proud of. And frankly, we're honored to be competing. Well, there you go. Utah fans, your AD says you're honored to be competing in the Big 12. And you know what? When you go 5-7 in the league in your first year and you were picked to win the thing, it might be good to show a little bit of contrition there and say, yeah, hey, happy to be here, happy to be competing. Or lack thereof, because there was not a lot of competing during the 7-game losing streak that happened last year for Utah. So in light of this, let's just, if you'll indulge me, let's take a step back and look at how year one of having both Holy War participants in the conference wins. Okay. Utah comes in with a brazen cockiness because they're, one, upset about the Pac-12 burning down. They're, two, upset that they were wrong in the battle between fan bases, Big 12 and Pac-12, as to what was happening as George Kliavkov was overseeing the sinking of the SS Pac-12 Titanic. They're upset about that. And three, they know, hey, Cam Rising's back. The last 2 years that we had him healthy, we won the Pac-12 and went to the Rose Bowl. So there's a brazen cockiness, just brash cockiness, looking down upon everything in this league. BYU, meanwhile, was picked 13th, but still very humble and just happy to be in the Big 12, maybe wondering a bit if Kalani Sitake is the right guy for the job, and wondering who their starting quarterback was going to be, whether or not that would be Gary Bohannon or not. That's where Utah and BYU were coming into the season. Well, now, let's look at what happened on the field. Utah, brazen, brash, cocky, deals with Cam Rising issues once again with injuries, which was something that I said in preseason. Like, hey, I feel like there should be more discussion about this. I don't think it's a guarantee the guy's going to stay healthy. I don't wish anything poorly on him, but we've just seen, it's been like 2 years since he's played a full game. Cam Rising gets hurt. They lose 7 straight games. They finish ahead of only one team in the Big 12 standings and miss a bowl game for the first time in a non-COVID season in a decade. That was year one in the truck stop conference, that was not worthy of them, filled with podunk schools in the middle of nowhere that cannot compete, cannot hold Utah's jock. Have you seen our Rose Bowls? They go 5-7. That actually really hurt the Big 12. As I have said many a time, the fact that Utah, the preseason pick to win the league, performed so poorly. If it were Utah that had BYU's resume, they're probably getting legitimate discussion for a second playoff spot. But Utah screwed the league on that by being almost the worst team in the conference after being picked to win the league. Objectively hurt the league's chances to make the playoff with their poor performance. Meanwhile, BYU, humble as can be, wins 9 straight to start the year, climbs into the top 10, beats Utah on the road in the thrilling Holy War. You get Utah whining, complaining. AD throws a temper tantrum, creates national headlines, an embarrassing situation as he slams the league. BYU then does drop a couple of games, but they wreck Colorado in the most watched non-playoff bowl game of the season. And they at least gave the Big 12 a puncher's chance, like a shot at a second at-large team in the playoff instead of completely tanking the league's chances by being picked first and finishing 5-7. Little bit of a difference. A little bit of a difference here. And off the field, that's basically what was happening off the field or on the field. Off the field, as I mentioned, you've got the AD basically validating the entire. If Utah Twitter were a person, what Mark Harlan did at that microphone was act exactly as Utah Twitter as a person embodied would have acted. And so it just gave it like vindicated this whole attitude from their fan base, which had frankly just been disgusting from them as it related to the Big 12. Instead of humbling themselves in the midst of a horrible season, it just gave more life to all of those fans there. Meanwhile, BYU, it's like all you hear about BYU during the year, as they're drilling everybody and starting 9-0, they're giving fans ice cream at the stadium. I went and saw my team lose 38-9, and people could not have been nicer. Avery Johnson, K-State's quarterback's talking about how it was weird because he's not used to people in the stands encouraging him from the opponent. BYU doesn't complain when they're left out of the playoff discussion, and they should not have been. You really didn't hear much complaining at all. Hell, they give Kalani Sitake a chance at the Alamo Bowl press conference to say something and make his case, and he passes. That's BYU. Ideal partner, ideal league member, doing their part competitively. Utah, brash, cocky, complaining, loses, hurts the league's reputation, takes shots at the league from the podium, and sucks on the field. Sucks. That's how year one wins. If we want to even throw in one other thing, BYU landed the number 1 high school basketball recruit in the country for next year, which got them, Stephen A. Smith is doing an interview with AJ DeBonsta and getting the Big 12 more pub that way. And we're not seeing that from Utah. We're not seeing that from Utah. Now, Utah can get right back on the horse. If things work out, if they're, they basically bet big on the New Mexico football program. If Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator, and Devin Dampier, the quarterback, work out, Utah they've got plenty of championship DNA in that program. They could be right back up near the top. But year one, frankly, was an embarrassment for Utah. And at least Mark Harlan, the athletic director, is coming back around now, tail tucked between his legs a little bit to, I don't know if like full on apologize is the right word, but show some level of contrition for everything that happened there and his role in it, at least his role in it. All right. I hate it when this camera gets the focus wrong. My apologies here. Whatever. If I'm a little blurry, my apologies. Bear Down Cats. What's up, Bear Down Cats? Bear Down Cats. Bear Down, John. You were the voice of the Big 12. Thanks for your insights. Hey, thank you for that. There are plenty of others who do a great job talking about the Big 12 as well, covering the conference. But I'm flattered by that. Thank you, sir. I fell asleep during I should admit this. I fell asleep during the Arizona UCF basketball game. I was like dozing off on the couch last night. I was going to double check the score here just to make sure before I congratulate Arizona on its resurgence. Okay, Arizona won. I should have just rolled with it. Arizona won 4-0 in the Big 12, playing much better. Bear Down Cats. So congratulations to your Cats on another win there. West Virginia beat Colorado today. Okay. Not surprised by that. But thank you, Bear Down Cats, for being here. And Eddie, one more from Eddie. Eddie, I'm glad he apologized. All Big 12 schools need to know we are fighting for all 16 schools' survival. We can be competitors on the field, but united in our fight for survival and growth. Go Big 12. Well, you're totally right, Eddie. The problem is Utah has never viewed it as they're fighting for their survival. They viewed it as we are above that fray. We are in the group of the elites. Never mind that nobody in the elite conferences threw them a life raft when their conference imploded and they had to come to the Big 12 because they are in the same boat, whether they like it or not. So that's the problem here. We don't have a baseline agreement on place in the world from Utah fans generally there. I'm not saying all of them, but that's the general vibe. And it's also the vibe that your athletic director put out there at the podium the night of the Holy War. So, yeah, but I'm with you, Eddie. I'm with that sentiment. Okay. Good show. Lot to talk about. Thank you all for being here. Please like the video on your way out the door. Tons of Twitter people in here. Twitter people, subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. You get Big 12 news without SEC or Big 10 crap. None of that. You get college football news through a Big 12 lens, free to your inbox twice a week, ofbnews.com. in order to sign up for that. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please spread the word. Tell everybody. Join me back here Wednesdays, Sundays for the live shows. Enjoy the other content as well. I think that's about it, everybody. Thank you for... I'm going to try. I know I say this all the time. I'm going to try and keep doing these a little bit earlier. Do them in the 7 o'clock hour if I can. So hopefully that will continue. But thank you for obliging me on that tonight. And good crowd. Thank you for being here. Take care. I will talk to you all very soon.